This video will answer the question of how much an apartment in Georgia costs today, on average. How much can it be rented out, and will reasonably explain why advertising slogans about 5 years payback of Georgian estates doesn't work. As a basis, we will take statistics from one of the largest real estate portals in the world, the Global Property Guide. Most likely, this is the first time you have heard its name if you haven't worked in the real estate sphere. But among the professionals, it is quite well known because of very simple methods they use to calculate. It is visited approximately by 500,000 people per month, and statistics for different countries of the world are collected there. I was interested in their statistics because their result partly matched my own research, but more interesting was the fact that they openly explained the sources from which they get their statistics. It is not very deep and not very detailed, but it answers the simplest questions. How much does an apartment in Georgia cost now, and how much can I rent it out if I buy it? Since they provided a link to the methodology, everything is very simple here. For both Tbilisi and Batumi, they collected all real estate prices from the largest portal SSG and displayed average values for purchase and rental. I partly agree with this because in my price analysis I also use my home G, and according to my observation, Tbilisi residents prefer SSG and Algerians prefer my home G. For this video I used their basic open statistics, which is free for all users. And if you are interested market researcher like me, then you repeat the results of their analysis yourself, simply by spending time collecting and processing data from the largest real estate websites in Georgia. I mean SSG and my home G. There are many researches on the topic of real estate in Georgia in the internet, but most of this analytics comes from the wrong place. The problem is that 90% of real estate researches is done by real estate companies, and they always have two forecasts. The first is everything is good, and it is designed for real estate buyers, and the second is everything is bad, and it is designed for sellers that they reduce their prices. Therefore, nothing is usually clear from their forecasts. But you need to understand that a real estate agent is a broker, and he makes money by conducting a transaction and not by analyzing the market. Like any broker, he must issue forecasts that are not smart but loud in order to attract both buyers and sellers. For example, if you read Telegram chats in Georgia, then you have come across headlines that rent in Georgia has fallen by 15%, 20% and 25%. These articles varies, but not a single article on this topic goes beyond 25%. In fact, the rental prices fell exactly on 50% from the top of 22nd year. And those people who publish research on this topic know this. But the figure of 50% will frighten buyers who take real estates here as an investment, and then no one will come to buy. That is bad. What you gonna do? You can't lie directly, but you can play with numbers. First, publish information that prices have decreased by 15%, then that they have decreased by 20%, then by 25%. Now let's take the price of renting an apartment at $1,000 and reduce it by 15%. That leaves $850. Then we subtract 20% from 850. We get $680. Then we subtract another 25% from the remaining $680. And we end up with only $510. That shows how rent was fallen by half. But if you publish this gradually, then that won't look so scary. It seems to be that it is now unprofitable to buy real estate in Georgia. Not certainly. It will be correct to ask, it is not profitable to buy estates in Georgia in comparison with where? If you want to say that it is unprofitable, you need to understand where it is profitable then. We shall just use the open statistics of global property. It indicates the average percentage of rental yield in Georgia as 7.85. If we consider that the price increased in 22nd and decreased in 23rd, then this is the average value. It means that if on average you bought an apartment here and rented it out on average price in the country, then from an apartment worth $100,000 a year, you will earn a gross of $7,850 or $650 per month. I'll note right away that I'm not interested in such profitability. It's too low for me, but averagely for Tbilisi and Batumi, it's exactly like that. How did they calculate the average price? Quite crude, but quite effective. They collected all the advertisement from the website SSG for sale and also collected all the advertisement for rent. The result was this gross figure. Just for comparison, the rental yield in Israel is only 2.85% per year, which is why Israelis are so willing to buy in Georgia. Simply because even if you make the most unprofitable purchase here, you will earn twice more than there. Compare Georgian income with gross of your country and find out where it is more profitable. Also, for example, even in Dubai, you get average gross income 30% lower than in Georgia. That's just statistics. And here is a screenshot of how much income rent brings in major cities in Spain, Italy, and the leader of European estates, Dublin. Full statistics are closed, but in general I am ready to buy and review it in the video if you write about it in the comments. That is the most profitable real estate in Europe. Turns out to be slightly less than average rents in Georgia. How did they calculate it? Yes, in exactly the same way. They collected all the advertisement for sale and rent from the biggest websites in that countries. And here, of course, I have to hear my favorite comment from my conservative subscribers. It sounds like I'd rather put my money in the bank at interest and not fool around. It is a way, but not a better one, for some reasons. Firstly, no one will offer you 8% per annum on a dollar deposit. Averagely, it will be 2, maximum 3.5%. Secondly, your deposit will be only insured partly, which means there is a risk of losing it when bank collapses. And third, the deposit will not grow itself. But price for real estate in Georgia grew by 15% averagely in 2023, despite the fact that it was not the most productive year compared to 22nd, for example. And this figure again doesn't interest me in any way, because personally I am aiming for a higher profit. But this requires some effort. I will tell about that later in the video. It turns out that on average, even if you don't do your best and buy something average in Georgia and then rent it out, you could get 8 plus 15, that means 23% annual return in dollars if you do everything in the right way. In the right way, I mean don't buy overpriced estates and don't pay 10% commission to greedy brokers. For getting such income, a gross one, you had to buy estates for $100,000 in December 22nd, rent it out for $650 per month for the entire 23rd year, and sell it for $115,000 at the beginning of the 24th year. Moreover, 23rd was both a year of price increasement at the beginning and stagnation starting from the second half of the year, because the wave of freelancers ended around June, and the usual number of buyers appeared on the market again. But there were more sellers, of course, and of course more offers of secondary real estate appeared. My favorite real estate agents. When the greedy owl, the arrogant moomin troll, and slippery Mr. Proper comes to you and declares that they are ready to sell your apartment with a commission of 5 or 10%, you can politely tell them, well, my dear, you will have honey and nuts, but be so kind as to sell my apartment, which I bought a year ago, at 17% high price. Then I will give you, instead of 3%, as it is usually paid in Batumi, 5% commission. And if you are so brave and can demand as much as 10%, then be a bunny and sell my apartment for 22% higher price than I bought it. This will be a very good deal, but it will be within the permissible deviation according to statistics and not at your expense. And you will suddenly see that this guy doesn't cost even a 3%. Why I'm talking about this with a slight indignation? Because I'm already selling my third apartment in Batumi, and over these years, both Greedy Owl, the insolent Moomin Troll, and the Mr. Proper had already came to me, which means they will also come to you, and they will convince you that they are cooler than all the realtors in Batumi. But in fact, no one can give you guarantees that he will sell your apartment, even if this is the best realtor in the world. And generally, we don't know. The best one will sell your apartment or the worst one, or you will do it yourself. You will sell your apartment by chance, with or without agent, and if you want to sell it with normal profit, you just need to distribute it to everyone who sell estates and with an adequate commission, which will not leave you without pence, and which for Batumi is still 3%. And if you need it urgently and really need money right now, then just know that not the size of commission plays a role, but the number of people who offer and sell it. I say this as a person who worked in real estates before for 7 years in 3 different countries. I did not make any billions from it and encountered dozens of greedy realtors. Among real estate professionals, profiting from ignorance or the difficult financial situation of a client is considered indecent, and professionals usually earn money from selling large projects, where the commission's percentage, of course, lower, but gross is higher. And sucking income out of a person who is forced to sell the studio for which he was been working for a half of his life is considered indecent and ugly among professionals. I still communicate with agents from Bulgaria and Sochi, and recently agents from Arabian Emirates. And I can say that this still sounds very indecent, but most part of realtors on this market plays that game. And of course, I also know decent real estate agents in Batumi. But again, if you are selling real estates and not buying, it is not quite the quality of the guy matters, but only the quantity. Also matters how much you will spend on expenses during the transaction. And don't think that if today a client who could buy your apartment rides around and looks for properties with Mr. Proper, who scratches 10% commission, tomorrow won't come to your apartment with a normal agent. He will come because it's 21st century, and because even retired persons can use internet for browsing right now, and they can, and everyone can compare prices. It's okay for the moment. Let's return to the statistics before I promise to tell how much an apartment in Batumi and Tbilisi costs on average and how much profit it brings. For example, in Tbilisi's district Saburtalo, which is very popular among expats and in generally fairly comfortable area, according to Global Property, average one-bedroom apartment costs about $98,000, and the same apartment can be rented out for $600 a month on average. On my own opinion, I will add, if you are over 35 years old and you are looking for something more comfortable for living, exactly, you will have to add plus $100 for rent and $20,000 for purchase price if you need it comfortable. The more elite districts of Tbilisi Vake will offer you studios for $92,000 averagely, and you will rent them out with a slightly lower yield than a one-bedroom apartment in Sabortalo. But what is much more interesting is that in Didi area you can buy studios for about $40,000 and receive an average income of more than 11% per year, which is 1.5 times more than average income in Georgia. This is normal practice. The cheaper the property, the greater the risks associated with it on the one hand, and the higher profit you get on the other hand. But these numbers are still not interesting for me personally to enter into a deal myself, although they already looked worthy and impressive for most people. Now let's jump to my beloved Batumi, where I now live with my beloved wife in our new apartment, and I would like to live at least 1 more year before I sell it. Let's check the statistics. We open it for the district of Batumi called Himshashvili. Here is situated my apartment. Now we can see that an apartment with 2 separate bedrooms now costs here about $95,000. But let's get deeper to understand what is high prices, what is low prices, and what is the difference between them in any district. The fact is that the Himshashvili district is a relatively expensive and most developed area in Batumi, and is located as close as possible to the sea, and in general it is the most populated area today near the Alley of Heroes. There is a price range of about 3 times between same size apartments here. Today you can buy a totally crushed apartment for renovation in the old building on the ground floor away from the sea, for example, for $800 per square meter. And this will be a great price, especially if you adore prehistoric era buildings. You can also take a white frame in a more or less completed Alliance building, which people call an ice cream for its shape, on a high floor for a normal $2,500, and it will be very expensive. My third option is somewhere in the middle, an apartment as close as possible to the sea with its sea views in a rented house with a gas and its own large parking around. So my house is somewhere in the middle in terms of cost per square meter in the area in the range of $800 and $2,500. The second component of the price in estates is the renovation and furniture with appliances. Here the price range is from about $500 per square meters to $1,500, where expensive renovations in the upper price segment contains expensive materials, sound insulation, heated floors, and many other little things that greatly improve the quality of life. But goddamned, it's expensive. So the cheapest renovated apartment in Himshashvili area costs $1,300 per square meter in Khrushchev-era buildings, and the most expensive is about $4,000 somewhere in Hilton or Alliance. From this we get an average price of about $2,700 per square meter. Although the bulk of apartments here are much cheaper because there are more old houses and there are almost no normal renovations. By the way, I left the repair estimation under the video about the renovation of my apartment in Batumi, but this video is in Russian language with English subtitles. As a reference document with store names and price tags, it will be very useful for those who do the renovation in Batumi themselves. All the discounts you can get from the maid suppliers and builders can be safely added to the cost of your apartment, of course. My designer and foreman did this for me, and as a result they reduced costs of renovation for me by about 20%. I guess that it can be useful for you too, but sorry, they don't speak English. Also, for comparison, the World Trade Center is being built in front of my windows, where a square meter now starts at $2,500, but it won't be ready for rent anytime soon, and it is now selling very well, primarily thanks to the developers' installment plans. And there is a nuance. The the other facility of this building, which is located next to the Hilton, was supposed to surrender in 21st, and now let me remind you it's 24th. Well, so that for every spoon of honey there is a fly in the ointment. The rate and profitability of real estate in Batumi is on average 1.3% lower than in Tbilisi. But if you rent it out daily during the summer sea season, you can see significantly increasing the profitability of daily rentals for 3 months. You just need to understand that this is a business already and not the lazy life of rentier. And with one apartment, it is not economically profitable to do such things. Having gone through all these numbers and talked about the calculation methods, we need to summarize. Georgia is in the top 5 countries in the world where real estate prices are rising. The rental yield here is much higher than in Europe, the Emirates or Israel. In Georgia, the price tag is significantly lower than anywhere else, and this is one of the most important growth factors because cheap real estate in percentage increases in price much more. I recommend double checking all the numbers yourself. It is not difficult and doesn't require much knowledge in the matter. And the main thing to remember is that any analytics can come from the word, from the place where the word analytics starts. And the main factor is the successful purchase of real estate is to plan before buying a scheme for its sale in 3 different scenarios: good, normal, and bad. Thank you very much for your attention. See you at the sea.